right. So, hey guys, welcome back to my podcast. Today I have with me my friend Mike from Orlando, Florida. Hey Mike, how's it going?
Doing well. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. Thanks for joining the show.
Oh, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, so we could see from your background you're like a diehard, hardcore Magic fan, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, I am.
Um, but that's got to be rough, right?
It's a lot
I
of
feel
heartache,
like
a lot of
yeah,
pain,
a lot of pain. I,
a
I
lot
I
of
would
pain.
imagine so. A lot of suffering over the
Yes,
years.
a lot of
Yeah,
suffering.
that's tough. I'm sorry. But
But we're
you
on our way back.
yeah, you guys you're on the way up, I think.
We are.
Hopefully. Good.
Hopefully.
So one of the
Mhm.
things we're going to talk about today is the shift within the NBA from an era of dynasties and super teams to an era of parity, more of a level playing field, where star talent is dispersed across the league, leading to more competitiveness, right? Um, we've had five different championship teams in the last 5 years, right? Last season, Adam Silver reported that within the last 2 weeks of the season, you still had 26 teams competing for the playoffs because there was just like a small margin of separation in the seedings, right?
Yep.
So when you compare this to, let's say, like 10, 15, 20 years ago, you had like repeat champions back then and like one or two teams dominating. But today, we have more of a level playing field, more parity, multiple contenders, that sort of thing. I know we've had the KD Warriors up to 2019, but after that, there's been a shift. And I'm not saying that there can't be any more dynasties. There can be teams that draft and develop talent and go on to win championships. I just feel like it's going to become increasingly harder to have repeat champions. Like back in the day, we had a whole lot of Lakers and Celtics and even Spurs championships. I feel like with the new generation that's coming up, the NBA is moving in this direction where it's going to be wide open with multiple contenders.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, the revenue, like the TV revenue and everything like that, and the way that they've done the new CBA. I mean, it just makes it tougher, right? It makes it more of a level playing field. So it's really going to be come down to front offices and how they manage, you know, the guys that they bring in.
And parity exists today largely because, well, first of all, the level of talent and the distribution of talent league wide. It's a star-studded league, isn't it?
It very much is,
Right?
yes.
Yeah. It's a star-studded league. The talent is not limited at all. It's not in short supply. And even the lower seeded teams, every team has at least one player who's worth watching or one player that you can build a team around, even trickling down to small market teams who typically, I mean, historically have not attracted a ton of star talent.
Hmm.
Another important reason for parity is the way the NBA's salary cap is set up. So there's a minimum amount you have to spend, right? So it's not like you can't have like a cheap team full of scrubs, right?
Correct.
You
Yes.
can't underspend. So you have to have at least one big salary player. But then you can't overspend and like stockpile a bunch of max contract players either. And now the new collective bargaining agreement is going to implement harsh penalties on high spending teams that go over that second luxury tax apron, making it harder for them to add to their already stacked and expensive team. So generally, there should be more talent on the market instead of, you know, the talent being consolidated on just a few teams is going to be spread out. So that's basically how we arrived in this phase of parity. But my question to you is, how do you think the shift from dynasties and super teams to a more level playing field has impacted the enjoyment of watching the game for fans around the world? Is it more intriguing now? Is it more boring? Are you personally a fan of the super team concept?
Personally, I am a huge fan of that, being a fan of a smaller market team. But I
Hmm.
mean, if we can go back to like, like I hear stories from, the late 70s, late 80s of, when the NBA was on tape delay, they weren't broadcasting live games. And then you had, Bird and Magic coming in, and that pretty much changed everything,
Hmm.
basically, more eyes, like it basically more people wanted to watch the games
Viewership,
and
yeah.
more viewership. And I really feel like those teams, like back then, the Celtics and the Lakers were both like dynasties
Hmm.
and super teams.
Hmm.
Magic, Kareem, and you had Worthy, and then you had Bird, McHale, Parrish. Those are super teams as well. They pretty much dominated the whole decade. But I think that was like the blueprint for the NBA. For ratings,
Hmm.
revenue.
Right.
And then you come into parity today where it's just, as you said, it's like competition. So it's
Yeah.
level playing field for all 30 teams. And I think that's great for those teams and the fans
Yeah.
of those franchises. And as you said, the last five champions are not repeat champions; they're all new champions.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I feel like that's great for true fans of the league. Maybe not so much for the casual fan. And also going back on like the team aspect of things, basically they're able to compete. They're able to sell to their fan base. Their season ticket holders say, hey, that we're in this. We can make the play in. Once you get into the plan, anything can happen.
Right.
So
Yeah.
and also bringing up the next generation of fans too.
Yeah.
So not all the great players are just with the big market teams. The smaller market teams are able to grow their fan base through the next generations coming up.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I think that in terms of viewership, super teams certainly attract casual fans. Um, Either to jump on the bandwagon and root for the super team or be a hater and root against them. But either way, they're watching, right? Um, I always remember when the Lakers assembled that team with Kobe, Pau Gasol, Dwight, Steve Nash. Remember that? And the basketball world
Vividly.
was in a frenzy, and Lakers fans were so hyped about this team. And then on the other side of the coin, you had people who were just waiting to see them fail, right? At least on paper, they were supposed to be a dominant team, right? It didn't work out that way, but it was set up for that purpose. Um, and it was the same reaction for the 2010 Heat and the 2017 Warriors, all the villain teams, so to speak. Um, but the question then becomes the question I always like to ask so-called fans. If you don't have a super team to root for or against, do you still love the game? And I think that's what separates casual fans from hardcore fans. Like for me, I love the game regardless. Like I'll watch any team in the finals, any team. Some people were kind of disappointed with the Heat Nuggets finals. Like I've heard people say they're not watching the finals if LeBron's not in it or if Steph's not in it, you know? Um, they want to see that rivalry. They want to see who's going to get ring number five. And I get it. It's exciting to watch, but for me, like at the end of the day, I just want to see good quality hoops. I just want to see guys out there competing at the highest level. And more you realize the separation between casuals and true fans of the game. Casual fans, like I said, they want to see Steph and LeBron battle it out. They don't care about, like, for instance, they don't care about a team like the Kings making the playoffs after a 16-year drought. You know what I mean? I care about that. Being a hardcore
Absolutely.
fan, I care about stories like that. I thought that was an amazing story for the league last season. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. 100%. It's great for that fan base. And when Sacramento has a good team, I mean that place is lit. And but for me, I love the underdog, and
Hmm.
and you know seeing the young guys get their shine. Being able
Yeah.
to have winning seasons, get into the playoffs, make noise in the playoffs. And don't get me wrong, like I love seeing LeBron and
Of course.
KD and those guys. Sometimes I kind of feel like maybe a little fatigued,
Hmm.
and sometimes I want to see like the new guys come up and see how they stack up, how they match up to the LeBrons, KDs,
Hmm.
of the world. But Yeah, I mean, I guess it just depends on casual fan versus the true fan.
Exactly. And of course, we all want to see the superstars. Like they make the league, you know. But we shouldn't like just tune out to all the other talent that's there because there's a lot of talent to see. So generally, while super teams may be good for the NBA financially in terms of viewership, ratings, revenue, it's not good for this sport overall. Because ideally, you want to generate more competition, so you bring the best out of players at all levels.
Yes, absolutely. And I believe, I think I read in some articles that the league is looking to expand in a couple of years.
Hmm.
So, I mean, it just shows, yeah, I mean, the parity, the talent,
Yeah.
we can have now 30, maybe go to 32 teams.
But let me ask you, do you think there are any super teams currently in the league? And if so, who are they? What makes them a super team? Like, define for me what is a super team.
To me, a super team is like three or more like all-star type
Mhm.
players that are like on that Hall of Fame track
Yeah.
that come together, join forces to try to win a championship. That would be my definition of a super team.
Hmm.
As far as what teams currently, I mean, it's got to be the Suns.
Yeah.
Um, Maybe throw the Bucks in there. I mean, Dame and Giannis. Middleton was an All Star at one point, and the
Hmm.
Celtics and the Celtics. I mean, Tatum, Brown, and Drew Holiday. Great
Hmm.
pickup. Love that
Hmm.
pickup for them. Those are about the only teams I can think of currently that I would consider super teams in the league.
Yeah, I was thinking about it. I was actually having this debate with someone just today about like what is a super team? And the definitions vary, but it's not just any big three. It's at least three all-stars who join forces more or less on a short-term basis, either through trades or free agency for the purpose of ring chasing. And it would have to be perennial all-stars. So not just like one-off all-stars. You know what I mean? And it has to be guys who are in their prime. I would even take it further to say that at least one of those players has to be like MVP caliber. Like what I'm trying to say is it can't just be any three all-stars because you can have a big three that's not a super team,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
There's a difference between big three and super team. That's what some people don't get. They think any big three is a super team. That's not it. Some guys are just excellent complementary pieces. You know what I mean? They're like really,
Yeah.
really good complementary pieces, but in themselves, they're not like the franchise player. When it comes to the Celtics and Bucks, there is some debate about whether they are super teams. You said you think they are.
I do
I
believe they are.
I don't necessarily think they are. Celtics have two max contract players in Tatum and Brown. And then they have two very solid players in Drew and Porzingis. But I see Drew and Porzingis as complementary pieces to the superstars. They're not superstars in themselves. And on the Bucks, you have two MVP caliber players in Dame and Giannis, and again, two solid complementary players in Middleton and Brook Lopez. Um, so I'm not sure if by my definition they meet the criteria for a super team, but they're very strong, loaded teams, serious contenders with a good chance of winning it all. Interesting question for you. If all the stars of a team are drafted by that team, could it still be a super team? For instance, the 73 and 9 Warriors, were they a super team? I mean, prior to KD going there. What do you think?
Absolutely. I absolutely do feel like they were a super team. I mean, and they did it, they drafted their players. So they got Steph in, I believe it was 2009. Um, and then you add Clay in 2011. And then you get the steal or the draft and Draymond in 2012. I absolutely feel like, that team was a super team. And then they had a lot of good complementary pieces as well. But, obviously they had Iguodala. I think they had Sean Livingston. Those guys were just coming into their prime and they were really, really good. And they're all stars. Draymond's like a multiple time defensive player, of the year. I mean, yeah, I do feel like they're definitely a super team prior to KD coming in. Yes, absolutely.
And so when KD got there, what did they become? Just like a
Not
super team?
not even fair. It wasn't fair. Yeah, I would say a super duper team. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, KD was just I've never seen a player like KD.
that
I
was
mean, to
yeah, that
be
was like overkill. Yeah.
overkill for sure. Yeah,
Mm,
absolutely. The best example that I feel about a team drafting their players and becoming a super team is the San Antonio Spurs and the run they had from 1997 to 2014. So when they got the number one pick, they got Tim Duncan. They drafted Manu in the second round in 1999, and then they got Tony Parker in 2001. You can definitely, put them in that, super team conversation. I really feel like that run that they had for that long, that sustained success with those guys, they were definitely a super team.
I'm gonna disagree with you there because I have a different opinion on that. Um, and I was debating this with someone just the other day, and the person was saying that any dominant team is a super team just based on the fact that they're dominating. I don't think that's true at all. Um, I think there's like specific criteria for a super team. It's when superstars join forces for the pursuit of a championship. So, for instance, the 2010 Heat, you had LeBron and Bosh joining D Wade. In my opinion, super teams don't draft and develop talent. That is something entirely different. So then, by that logic, I don't think the 73 and 9 Warriors were a super team prior to KD's arrival, even though they were so dominant. When KD joined them through free agency, obviously they became one, but not prior to that. They were just the greatest regular season team we've ever seen, but still not a super team, given the fact that their core players, Steph, Clay, and Dre, were all homegrown talent. The same thing I think with the Spurs with Tim, Tony, and Manu. When you have a team that has drafted and developed its talent, and they go on to enjoy a sustained level of success over time, I think that's classified as a dynasty as opposed to a super team.
I think they can definitely be both. I think they can definitely be both a super team and a dynasty. I mean,
Uh,
when you speak about guys that join together from different teams, you know, to for the again the purpose of creating a champion or winning a
mhm,
championship, the same thing could be with the guys that I mean, it doesn't change the fact that they're all stars, right?
mhm,
Whether they stayed with the same team that they were drafted on and became the players that they became,
mhm,
they were still all stars and they're still Hall of Famers.
mhm.
So to me personally, I just feel like you
They
can
can be the
definitely say
same thing. They,
be the same thing. Absolutely.
yeah. But these things are subjective. Like everybody has an opinion on it.
And that's what makes sports so great.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. And the fact that we can have these conversations and like share our different views, you know?